Financial stress and economic inequality is a complex and deeply ingrained issue, one that is often unnoticed in mainstream discussions about wealth and poverty. At the core of this issue lies a paradox. The more we work to attain financial security, the more we experience the psychological barriers and burdens of that pursuit. This paradox, coupled with the systemic structures of wealth inequality, shows how stress, whether from financial insecurity or social comparisons, become not just a consequence of poverty, but a tool of social control. Understanding dynamics is essential not only for addressing economic disparity, but for improving individual well being and societal stability. One of the foundational theories to explain the intersection of finance and stress is something called relative deprivation. And relative deprivation points that it is not absolute poverty that causes stress, but rather the perception of inadequacy in comparison to others. Studies have shown that even when people's basic needs are met, their subjective experience of financial insecurity can be driven by the wealth of those around them. This sense of relative disadvantage creates a psychological burden that leads to increased stress, dissatisfaction, and anxiety, often manifesting in behaviors like excessive spending, unhealthy consumption, or even addiction. When people constantly measure their worth or success against others, particularly those who are wealthier, they experience a chronic sense of insufficiency, regardless of their material circumstances. And this ongoing stress is exacerbated by the hyper-competitive nature of modern capitalism, where success is increasingly defined by wealth accumulation and outward signs of status. In a similar vein, social comparison theory further explains how the constant need to keep up creates a significant source of stress for individuals, especially in a consumer-driven culture. The rise of social media and the constant exposure to the curated, idealized lives of others have amplified these pressures. And research has shown that the more people compare themselves to others, the more likely they are to experience negative emotions, such as envy and low self-esteem. In societies with high levels of economic inequality, these emotions are magnified as the gap between the rich and the poor grow wider. This then becomes a self-reinforcing cycle. The stress from comparison leads to behaviors that exacerbate financial insecurity, like overconsumption or taking on debt in an attempt to appear more successful. The more people feel like they are falling behind, the more engage in financial practices that deepen their long-term stress, often trapping them in cycles of debt and emotional distress. This brings me to my next point of paradox of affluence, a concept that seems counterintuitive at first. The paradox suggests that as individuals become wealthier and more materially successful, they experience higher levels of psychological stress. While this might seem surprising, the theory points to the pressure to maintain one's status, the fear of losing one's wealth, and the increasing demands of high-stake lifestyles as significant stressors. Wealthy individuals, particularly those in high-pressure industries, often face an intense fear of failure and constant need to outperform others. And this stress is then compounded by the social isolation that often accompanies wealth. When people's relationships are defined by status, it can lead to feelings of loneliness and existential anxiety. These mental health challenges, rooted in the pressures of affluence, are rarely discussed in the context of financial well-being. Yet they underscore how wealth does not equate to emotional stability. In fact, the more affluent one becomes, the more they must navigate complex social dynamics and manage the strain of maintaining their positions, which can result in substance use, burnout, or mental health decline. The issue of financial stress becomes even more pronounced when we look at structural inequalities that define capitalist economies. While the wealthiest individuals have the means to protect themselves from the stress of financial insecurity through access to high-quality healthcare, mental health services, social safety nets, the majority of the population is left vulnerable. For those in lower income brackets, financial stress is not just a passing inconvenience. It's a daily reality that shapes their mental and physical health. According to studies on economic hardship, people living in poverty are more likely to experience higher levels of chronic stress, anxiety, and depression, which in turn leads to unhealthy coping mechanisms like substance abuse or poor dietary habits. These relationships between financial insecurity and mental health is not incidental. It is a direct consequence of the unequal distribution of resources in society. Moreover, the financial system itself plays a significant role in perpetuating these stressors. Debt, especially high interest debt, like credit cards or payday loans, acts as a mechanism that keeps people trapped in a state of constant financial pressure. The use of credit and loans is often framed as a way to achieve instant gratification or to provide short-term relief from financial stress. However, it often results in a long-term negative consequence. As people struggle to pay off their debts, they experience mounting psychological stress, which affects their overall well-being and decision-making. The accumulation of debt often exacerbates the feelings of inadequacy and failure, particularly when people feel unable to meet societal expectations of success. In this way, the financial system doesn't just take advantage of people's immediate financial needs, it capitalizes on their stress. Interestingly, while those in lower income brackets face significant stress related to their financial insecurity, they are also subjected to a financial culture that encourages instant gratification and excessive consumption as a way to cope with emotional and social discomfort. This consumer-driven culture, fueled by advertising and social media, creates a cycle of dissatisfaction and emotional vulnerability. People living paycheck to paycheck are often encouraged to buy things that they can't afford just to feel good about themselves. The pursuit of material goods as a way to alleviate emotional distress becomes a temporary solution that only deepens the financial hole. This consumer culture disproportionately impacts lower income individuals who are already more likely to be exposed to stress and less likely to have the resources to escape from it. In this context, the concept of financial literacy takes on a new significance. It's not just about learning how to manage money. It's about understanding the psychological and emotional forces that drive financial decisions. By understanding the broader systems or inequality and the ways in which financial stress is socially constructed, individuals can begin to break free from the cycles of comparison that keeps them financially insecure. Financial education, when combined with a critical understanding of the structural forces at play, can provide individuals with the tools to make healthier financial decisions, not just for the sake of wealth accumulation, but for their emotional well-being as well. So in summary, financial stress is not merely a product of poverty. It's a deeply embedded feature of modern economic systems that affect individuals across all social strata. From the paradox of affluence to the emotional impacts of societal comparisons, all the ways in which financial stress manifests in our lives are complex and multifaceted. But understanding these dynamics is critical if we are to address the underlying causes of inequality and begin to create a society where financial well-being is not just a privilege of the wealthy, but a right for everyone. In a world where wealth and success are increasingly defined by external markers, the ability to break free from the psychological pressures of comparisons, debt, and emotional stress is the key to building a happier and wealthier life. Now, I hope you found this video helpful. Thank you very much, and I'll see you next time.